The time has come for a new revolution. Not a revolution of violence or control, but a revolution of the mind, the heart, and the soul. A revolution that will touch the hearts of men to let them know that they no longer have to pretend. This is a place where men get to be real, because in this space they can say exactly what they feel. So men of all races unite and come in. This journey will challenge you to look deep within. So now, let the new revolution begin, because it's time for a new conversation with men. Welcome to a new conversation with men, where our intention is to empower men to live extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor, and joining me today is therapist and coach Russell Richard. How you doing, Russell?
I'm doing well.
Great. Well, today we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of men don't want to talk about. And that topic is, why is it so difficult for us to seek support? What is it that causes a man to shut down and not try to find ways to improve his life? So we're going to have a simple dialogue about some things that hopefully will help you recognize whether or not you are the type of person that are afraid to seek support, and hopefully challenge you to seek support if needed. So I want to begin first of all by introducing my guest, Mr. Russell Richard, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself.
How you doing, Michael? Again, my name is Russell Richard. I've been a therapist here in the Houston area for about 15 years now, actually over 15 years. And I've done a lot of different things throughout my career, and presently I have a private practice where I see clients. I've worked in agency settings over the years, nonprofit, even done some work in foster care, and it's been a really wonderful experience. I really enjoy what I do, and there's a lot to be said for that, because it's really a passion of mine to do this work.
And so, Russell, I'm curious now, obviously you're a therapist, and this show is about not therapy per se, but about personal transformation.
Yes.
And what you do is support men and women, actually, in transforming their lives. But because this is a new conversation with men, I'm wondering, how did you get involved with men's work?
I got involved with men's work through my own personal work. And actually that began back in 2000 as sort of an interesting story of how I got involved. My fiance at the time decided to give me a birthday present. And the gift was the New Warrior Weekend Adventure, which I knew absolutely nothing about it. And she had heard about it through a workshop that was presented. And she said, "Oh, I think this would be great for you. It'd be an opportunity to work on some father issues." And I said, "Okay."
Wow.
And that was it.
You said okay.
I just said okay. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't question it. I just said okay. And I think back on that because I'm the type of person that questions everything. I always want to know why. I haven't grown out of that stage yet of why. And interestingly enough, I did the weekend on my 30th birthday, and my life hasn't been the same since.
Wow.
And
what a birthday present.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my sort of introduction into men's work, and I'll tell you, it was diving into the deep end of the pool.
Well, I have to say that I've been doing this work for a while, and Russell is one of those guys that I ran across, and I know that it was by divine appointment, because I have developed a deep connection and respect for Russell and his work, and we have the same intention, which is empowering men to live extraordinary lives. So it is an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
So we're going to be talking about 10 reasons why men reject support. So for the last 15 years, I have been researching men's issues. I've written 3 books. I've hosted a radio show for the past almost 10 years now. And I have come to the conclusion that the 3 most difficult words for a man to say is, "I need help." And so what we want to do with this show is sort of address that, to talk about why is it so difficult for men to say those 3 simple words. So I want to begin by first of all asking you, why do you think it's so difficult for men to say those 3 words?
Well, I think the first thing we have to take a look at is we're talking about resistance. ultimately this show is about resistance. There's an opportunity to step into something that can make your life better. And there's some block, some hesitation there. And so whenever we look at resistance, whenever there's any sort of block into something that we're trying to do, we have to take a look at what's the risk. So there's some sort of risk that goes into anything that we're resisting. And oftentimes we aren't aware of that.
Okay. And
so one of the things that I like to do with people is whenever they are resisting something, it could be something good for them, it could be anything. Inherently, there's some risk in that. And so there's an exploration I like to go into with them about what is the risk of stepping into that. And so with this show we're doing here today, what are the risks that men may feel about engaging this process of personal growth work, transformation, asking for help, but so risky about asking for help? And there can be a lot of risk in that, actually.
Yeah, there is a lot of risk in that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why this is so risky for some men. And I have to speak from my own experience because some 20 years ago, I was, for lack of a better term, at the end of my rope. I had fallen into a deep, deep state of depression, and I really didn't have a choice. It was either seek support, seek help, or die. It's that simple. I chose to live, and I want to make sure that every man that's watching this program today makes that same choice if they're in that same situation. So what we're going to do is talk about some things that hopefully will trigger a man to be willing to take that risk, to be transformed. And so this show is about transformation. It's about transforming you so that you can live what I'm calling an extraordinary life. Now, I say that term, but you have to define extraordinary for yourself. But here's what I know. Every man has the capacity to live an extraordinary life. They have to define that for themselves, but the blocks that we're going to be talking about is what could be keeping you from living that extraordinary life. So Russell, let's talk about those 10 things, or it may not get to 10, but we're going to talk about some things that keep men from being willing to seek support. And you made a list, and one of the first things that came up was money.
Money, absolutely. I don't have enough money.
Don't have enough money.
I don't have enough.
So talk a little bit about why is that so difficult for men to say, I need help, but secondly, they use money as an excuse to seek support. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think first of all, Michael, in some cases it's not an excuse. It's a reality. It's a reality. There are people who make varying degrees of incomes, and there are people who have various financial responsibilities. And so I don't want to minimize that, because for some people it really is a challenge to engage this process because it can be costly. Sure. I know you and I have both spent a lot of money doing this sort of thing over the years. Right. But also I would say there's a lot of opportunities to engage this transformational journey that don't cost anything. So I do want to put that out as well. But you mentioned the word excuse, and oftentimes money does become an excuse, but I think one of the things we have to take a look at is how are we spending our money? You know, I like to travel, and I like to eat. So, and I've often said when opportunities to do things have come up, said, well, I don't have money, or I'm broke. That's one of the languages I'm trying to get out of my mind is that I'm broke. But in reality, when I really kind of stepped back and took a look at where my money was going, it's like, okay, there is money there. It's just a matter of how am I going to choose to spend it? And do I see enough value in personal growth work, in transformational work, in healing work, to allocate my resources to those experiences? Well,
as mentioned, we want you to acknowledge the fact that, yes, there are times when you may not have the money. That's a reality. But let me use my own life as an example of why we can't allow that to keep us from engaging in our own transformation. Because you mentioned value. And I know it's difficult, possibly, for people watching this show to know or understand the value of healing your heart and soul and getting past all the trauma that's keeping us from living what I'm calling an extraordinary life. Right. But as I mentioned, some 20 years ago, when I had reached that dark period in my life and I said I didn't have a choice, I had to do something different, I had no money. I was so broke, I couldn't pay attention. I was in the middle of a bankruptcy. My house had been foreclosed on. I had no money in the bank whatsoever. But there was a part of me that knew I had to change. And the first thing that I did was I gained the courage to at least go to a therapist's office. Even though I didn't have the money to pay her, I at least took that first step to begin the process. And so the point here is, do not allow the lack of money to keep you from engaging in your transformational process. Because if you understood the value, and the value being the joy that I feel on a regular basis as a result of doing my work, you would run to the bank, you would find a way to get the money to get to this place. It's hard to see that now possibly, but it is available. We don't want to allow money to keep us from asking for support. Okay. So let's jump to number 2. And this is the big one. There's this negative stigma attached to therapy, especially for men, that it makes us weak, appear weak. So there's this whole consciousness around we aren't supposed to ask for help. So talk a little bit about the negative stigma attached to seeking therapy or support.
Right, absolutely. And particularly use the word therapy. And that word therapy is a very heavy word for a lot of people. And one of the things I talk about with clients when they first come into my office is, have you ever done this before? Many times they haven't. I'll also ask, what do you know or understand about the process, and where did you get that from? Because many people get it from television. Or movies, which can be a very distorted portrayal of what actually happens. So yeah, there is a lot of stigma, and of course we all know about the stigma of mental health and seeking mental health services. And the important thing to understand about that is that it is actually an act of strength, not weakness, to seek out support. And like you talked about, the place of joy that you're at right now, I would trade any stigma in the world to be in the place of joy that I experience right now on a daily basis. But so there is a lot of stigma that comes with it. And for men, that sort of trends into this whole idea of who we are as men. As men, we're supposed to be in control. We're supposed to be in charge. We're supposed to be almost invincible. Right. Almost. There's a phrase that I use a lot that says, hey, I'm not Superman. You know, I can't do it all. And I think there is sort of an expectation through how we're socialized that we are supposed to be men of steel and invincible and invulnerable. And so to ask for help is an acknowledgement that, hey, I can't do it all. You know, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the tools. I'm not equipped to take care of everything. And that can be really hard for a lot of men to get to that place of saying, you know, I really could use some support here.
And this is the reason I do this show. Is as men, we have to remove that negative stigma that asking for support makes us weak. Right. Makes us less than men.
I was just going to comment on the whole idea of really it takes a lot of strength to be able to ask for help. That may seem counterintuitive to a lot of people, but if the whole world is saying, okay, if you ask for help, that means you're weak, then that takes a whole lot of strength to be able to come upon all of that pressure and say, hey, you know, I really could use some support in what's going on in my life right now. I really could use some additional tools, some additional assistance. So you're really having to challenge a lot of very powerful messages, and that takes a lot of courage to stand up. And ultimately, what we're getting at is being authentically who we are. Yeah. And authenticity takes probably the most courage of anything to do in this world. And it is an act of strength to say, hey, let me go in and speak with somebody, whether it be professionally, whether it be friends, whether it be family. Sometimes people don't even feel comfortable asking for support within their own families. And so I just want to emphasize, like I said, it may be counterintuitive, but and kind of flipping this whole notion of weakness, asking for help is oftentimes one of the most powerful things anyone can do.
Yeah, I can attest to that, no question about it. But at the same time, I also know how scary it can be. So for those of you who are watching, know that fear is okay. But you have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Because on the other side is unimaginable joy if you're willing to go there. So let's talk a little bit about the big D word. This is a reason why a lot of men won't seek support, and that's denial. So talk a little bit about denial and maybe some of the defense mechanisms men use that keep them from seeking support.
Right, denial. One of my favorite phrases is saying denial is a powerful force. Because it really is. And we can be in denial consciously, we can be in denial unconsciously. I can know that stuff is going on with me, but I can just say, okay, I'm just not even going to bother with that. You know, I can get busy doing other stuff to sort of avoid it. I can rationalize things. I can just say, well, I got this to do, I got that to do, I'll get to all this stuff later. I got to get to work, I got to pay the bills, I got to take care of the kids, I got to do this, I got to do that. I don't have time to do this other stuff. And so there are many excuses that we can come up with to avoid actually going on the journey and seeking the help and seeking the support that we may really need, and that may enhance all those other areas of our lives that we're putting energy into, right, in avoidance of actually going on the journey.
So recognize that, as he mentioned, denial can be conscious or unconscious. For example, when I was going through my dark period, I was completely unconscious of the multitude of issues I had. I didn't know, because I was a typical American guy, you know, trying to figure out how to make the money. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all of that. And so my whole focus was trying to take care of all of that. So in its purest form, I was in denial about the issues that were going on within me. And it wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I gained the courage to do something about it.
Right.
So what you want to do is recognize that. And it's difficult to put this in words, but there's a part of you, I really believe, that knows if something is off. You know, there's because I can even think back, even back during my dark period, there was a part of me that kind of knew. I didn't know what that was,
right,
but there's a part of us that really wants to seek support. There's a part of us that wants to heal, that wants to grow.
right.
But we're up against all these external forces, society, families, and so forth.
In our own busyness.
Yeah, which can be a form of denial too.
Exactly. One of the things I see a lot is people like to stay 3-4 steps ahead of themselves. And when people get to a point in their lives when they can't keep running for whatever reason, they have to stop. It's like all of that stuff kind of catches up, and it produces a great discomfort. And that's often where a lot of awareness comes in. And if we are unfortunate to be able to pick up the busyness again, then we continue that cycle of being 3 steps ahead of ourselves. But if we are fortunate enough, in many cases, to be forced to stop, or if we choose to stop and just allow ourselves to become conscious and aware, then a lot of times a lot of things begin to come to the surface, and we get a lot of clarity on maybe not what to do, but there's something that needs to be done.
So there is the key to breaking out of denial is consciousness, being aware, becoming aware that something needs to change.
Exactly.
So let's talk about avoidance, because I know from my own experience, I used to avoid anything that had to do with emotional connection, for lack of a better term.
Right.
As mentioned, I was the typical American guy working really hard, you know, trying to make the money. But what I now realize is that I was avoiding me. I was avoiding the authentic self, if you will. So we're talking about why men don't ask for help. What I'd like to introduce now is the reason we should seek support. And one of the things we should move towards is discovering who we really are, especially as men.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want you to talk a little bit about avoidance. And then we're going to talk about how we can move through it and then get to connecting to who we really are.
Right. And there's a lot of ways we avoid things, a lot of ways we avoid ourselves, a lot of ways we avoid looking within, some of which we've talked about. I'm busy, I got work to do. And like you said, once we become aware, then the question is, okay, what am I going to do? And the avoidance can come in by saying, okay, well, I'll do it tomorrow. You know, I'll take care of this later. I don't have time right now. I have more important things to do. Well, what's more important than yourself?
Yeah.
You know, what's more important than taking care of you? Because me, myself, all of us, we are the vehicle that is going through life. And it's just like a car. If you don't keep your car tuned up and working properly, it's going to break down on you. And we're much the same way. If we don't focus on ourselves and do our own self-care, we're not going to function optimally. And that's the importance of doing the work, and that's the importance of reconnecting to ourselves. And you spoke about that just a second ago, and I think very early in life, not just men, but all of us, we get disconnected from ourselves pretty early in life. And part of that is because we have to. We are born into this big, huge, complicated world.
Yeah. And
part of our task is learning how to navigate all of the things that are going to come at us. So there's attention and focus that we have to put to what's going on outside of us. But I think oftentimes we do that at the expense of staying connected to what's going on within, and at the expense of staying connected to us.
Yeah.
And so that process begins very early, where we put all this attention on what's going on with us. How do I respond to this? How do I respond to that? And somewhere in there, the I is lost.
And so we're talking about why men are so hesitant and resistant to seeking support. We wanted to put a little information out there, hopefully to challenge you if you're the type of person that, number one, if you're watching this show right now, it is my belief there's a reason. And it's possible that there's something that we have said that may trigger you to begin your process. I really believe that. But what I want you to know is that it is absolutely possible for you to move through whatever challenge you may be facing in your life right now. Trust me, I have seen the lowest point in life, and I was the complete opposite of what you call living an extraordinary life back then. But what I can say as the result of some 20 years of my own personal growth and transformation is that the joy that I feel on a regular basis was actually worth all the pain that I went through.
Absolutely.
So now I want to kind of shift the focus just a little bit. Russell, you are a therapist and a coach, and hopefully we've removed some of the stigma to get people to come and speak to you. Okay?
Hopefully.
So what I want to talk to you now about, first of all, is that most people from the outside that may be in trauma, if you will, or chaos, they can't really see the benefit that you have for them by helping waking them up. So I want you to kind of just give them a taste of, number one, discovering who they really are, moving through all their stuff, and the joy that comes as a result of that.
Okay. Yeah, most of us go through life unconscious, asleep is one way to language that. And I think at some point everyone gets called to wake up. And I think sometimes we get called to wake up multiple times in our lives. The question is, do we answer the call? And do we go on that journey of waking up, of growth? And some people call it the hero's journey. That's one way to look at that. And there is some resistance oftentimes initially, because I think somewhere within intuitively we know that there's going to be an ordeal. There's going to be things that we have to look at. There's going to be things that we have to deal with. There's going to be some humility that has to come. And that's a very important component, I think, of this whole transformational process, is the humility of kind of putting aside all that I think that I know, putting aside this notion that, hey, I got it together, or whatever that might be, and realize that there is something bigger that I can tap into that will assist me in the journey and allow me to go through the journey. So I think humility is a big part of it. Faith is a big part of it too, because as you know, we have to take a look at some painful things and some dark things. And one of the things I like to impress upon people is that what we don't look at still lives inside of us. We all get wounded and scarred along the way. No one escapes that.
Yeah.
We all get hurt along the way. And to the extent those hurts aren't resolved, they live inside of us. And whether we are connected to it consciously or not, it's having an impact on us. And it always seeks to rise up. And one of the analogies I like to use is like trying to keep a beach ball submerged in water. And the amount of energy it takes to do that. And that energy gets taken away from other fun stuff you could be doing at the beach or in the water. And so all these unresolved things within us operate in a similar way. And again, whether we realize it or not, we're expending a lot of energy keeping that stuff down because it's trying to rise up so that it can be resolved and come out of us. And when we allow that process to take place, the payoff is that we free ourselves of it. And that opens up so much energy that can be allocated towards other things. And so one of the ways I language that is we go through this process of recovery, not necessarily addiction recovery, but recovery from those wounds and scars and the hurts and the pains that are living inside of us. And then we can enter into this new phase of life, which I like to call discovery. What am I here to do? What's going to bring me joy, fulfillment, and happiness and harmony in my life? What am I here to contribute? You know, and just being in that space of discovering all of who I am, all of who you are, discovering all that is within you. And the beauty of it is as you go through the recovery process, you discover these things about yourself that you may not have even known.
Right.
And the beauty of it is that we free ourselves and we have all this energy, and you mentioned this a few times, joy.
Yeah.
There is an absolute joy that comes when we relieve ourselves of these burdens that we've been carrying.
Which a lot of men can't connect to. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that anger is acceptable. Joy, on the other hand, is kind of looked upon like something's wrong with you. You know?
Right.
But that's our true nature, I believe.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here is the process of moving past all your, what some people would call baggage, and getting to a place where you feel alive, you feel connected. Right. These are the things that we really want to experience. These are the things that I believe will support you in living an extraordinary life. But it all begins with our willingness to simply say, I need help. I need support. And so hopefully what we've done with this show today is give you some food for thought. Think about your own life right now. And I love how you say resistance, because we all have felt that resistance to life. We've all felt that something's just not right. We may not be able to label it, but we know that that's resistance. And so the key here is to remove that resistance so that we can get to the joy, because the joy resides behind the resistance. Right.
And one of the questions I like to ask, I teach a class on happiness actually. One of the questions I like to ask is, does anybody in here want more happiness in their life? Or does anybody not want more happiness? And does anybody not want longer periods of happiness? And I'm yet to find anyone in any of my classes who said, no, I'm happy enough.
Yeah.
You know, and it happens long enough. So I think that's what we all want. And we started off talking about this whole idea of resistance and blocks. I think we all want that, but we may not necessarily be aware of all the things that are in the way to us getting that. And so if we're going to go on this journey, if we're going to go in pursuit of more happiness and longer periods of happiness, we have to take a look at, or first identify, well, what is it that's holding me back from that? Because if I'm not there, then there's something in the way.
Yeah.
And so I need to take a look at that so I can then do what I need to do to get that out the way and then accelerate my pathway there.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our ending, because we all want more happiness. There's no denying we all want more happiness. So I want to tell you that you've made me happy being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and wisdom with everyone. This is Russell Richard. I'm Coach Michael Taylor. Be sure to tune in to our next episode as we empower you to live extraordinary lives. Make it a great week.